Good morning, everybody. Lots to get to on today's episode of GoJo and Golic. First of all, Charlotte Wilder on a Tuesday joining the program. Cannot wait to talk to her about the Brady Baker beef and her take on all that. Plus, Big Ten and SEC possibly eyeing a scheduling deal. We will talk about that and more. Plus, Pete Rose, Dikembe, Mutombo both passed away. We'll talk about their legacies and all of that stuff coming up on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We are presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. And we got a great show for you guys that'll hopefully eat like a meal, too. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review it. Leave us a 5-star rating. And check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. As Jesse mentioned, some incredibly impactful sports figures unfortunately passed away yesterday. We will pay our respects there and remember some exemplary careers both on and off the field. We also got to get to plenty of news on the college football front. Really fun Heisman race shaping up this season. For people like my father that at times can become a little disenchanted with the award in its current form, I do think what we've got this year in terms of some of the players that could be making the trip to New York might restore our faith in humanity, not to sound too much like a BuzzFeed article. But we got to get to the games last night because, man, we saw a true tale of two cities going on for the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Because on one hand, we had an incredible performance, including a record-setting output from one quarterback in the Lions-Seahawks game that was the later start of the two, the 8:15 Monday Night doubleheader with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman and the main Monday Night Football crew. And then poor Dan Orlovsky and Louis Riddick and the rest of those guys for having to suffer through whatever that Miami-Tennessee game was, Dad. I get it's football. We're still early enough in the season where we're going to take whatever we get. But that felt like we were eating our vegetables last night to go along with the main course that was the Seahawks-Lions game.
That was tough to watch. That was a tough-to-watch game with neither quarterback throwing for over 100 yards. Will Levis turning the ball over for the 9th time this year and then getting hurt. His shoulder, trying to come back in, couldn't do it. And Mason Rudolph leads a Tennessee offense that kicks 5 field goals, 3 of them over 50 yards by Nick Folk, to get a 31-12 victory over Miami, which is just in absolute shambles without Tua.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening in a way that, you know, for Tua, who's on the sideline, and Dad, I thought the biggest news of that early game last night was the conversation that happened beforehand where Adam Schefter and others said that Tua Tagovailoa, at this point, it sounds like his intention is to come back and continue playing football. I saw him in the Monday Night Countdown crew talking about the fact that for all the conversation that went on about the future of his career for people that weren't Tua Tagovailoa, there's never really been a conversation for him. And so you saw him on the sideline. He still got time before he can come off the injured list. But this is a guy that fully intends on coming back. And, Dad, for people that might have had questions about that contract before, we always say that there's a time when you're a player where, hey, listen, when you're out, you don't want your team to lose by any means, but you want them to miss you. Man, oh man, this Miami Dolphins team misses the hell out of Tua Tagovailoa, so he can rest easy knowing that his importance to this team has been made abundantly clear in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, he's 20-13 as a starter. Without him, they're 1-6, and more importantly, they're scoring 10 less points a game. I think 26 to like 15.8 or 9 or to say 16 to round it up. So that's a huge thing. They're just not scoring. Tyreek Hill hasn't had over 50 yards receiving this year. It just craters the entire offense.
Are you surprised by that at all, given what we've talked about with Mike McDaniel over the years?
Well, I am a bit. You know, we're talking about the young kind of guru-type offensive-minded coaches that are spread throughout the league, with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and the branches of the tree from those guys about how they can make it work. With different quarterbacks, Kevin O'Connell, what he's doing in Minnesota, Matt LaFleur, what he's doing with Malik Willis. I mean, so there is some thought to why can't he, didn't make it happen with Skylar Thompson, who ended up getting injured, had hurt ribs. Tyler Huntley last night, not throwing for over 100 yards. So there is a thought to not make your system quarterback friendly. Now, there's certainly great quarterbacks are going to always take your offense to a new level, but to not have especially, and remember Tom Brady said it's kind of dumbed down now offenses for quarterbacks, which in a way is true. The way quarterbacks have come in from college, they're not as intricate. To not be able to have not be able to just replace one and have no downfall. There would be no difference of a starter and a backup then. But to just be this non-existent on offense without your main quarterback is somewhat alarming.
I think once we got to the Tyler Huntley portion of events, who, again, was signed off the Ravens practice squad 2 weeks ago. It's not like he's been here a long time. That right. I can understand more because while people say, hey, these offenses are a little bit easier, the Shanahan-McVay ones, you got to operate a lot pre-snap. It's why we talked about Brock Purdy was a guy uniquely positioned to come in and do this because the offense he ran at Iowa State also involved a lot of that. He was a guy that played a ton of football in college. And while, listen, Tyler Huntley's a guy that's played a lot of NFL football, he hasn't been in this specific system that asks you to do a lot of that before the snap in a way that might take some getting used to. We get in this mode where we see stories like Baker Mayfield from a couple years ago going to the Los Angeles Rams and winning a game on 3 days notice and make it sound like that's commonplace or easy to do. So I'm sympathetic there. I think the thing that surprised me a little more, Dad, the more I think about it with Miami is that they didn't have a better plan at backup quarterback going into this season, understanding that injury has been a part of Tua's career, even removing the head injury portion of things, and to have someone you were capable of bringing in for at least a little bit, like we've talked about with most organizations where at some point, if your quarterback gets something done, you've got to have a guy that's able to be a stopgap for a couple of games. And the fact that Miami didn't have the foresight to have someone ready for that. We'd seen Skylar Thompson play in meaningful games because of injury before, but the fact that they didn't have him in place where they felt like they could do that even when he was healthy on the field. Again, this is excluding the rib injury with him. It's not like it looked great last weekend before that.
And while Mason Rudolph will go as the backup winning quarterback for Tennessee, even he said, I didn't do much. He wasn't asked to do a whole lot. He was 9 of 17 for 85 yards. Will Levis was 3 or 4 of 4. So they didn't have to throw the ball much. They ran it 40 times and controlled the ball with their offensive line and their running back, so the quarterbacks didn't have to do much. But it does open up the question of, is Will Levis going to be the starter? And he's going to be the starter. They have a bye, so he'll have more time for his shoulder to heal. And that's got to be the biggest question for Tennessee that got their first win of the season. They're not a very good team, and when you're not a very good team, you can't afford to have turnovers, and Will Levis leads in turnovers with 9, just 4 games in. So do you let him work through it? Do you say he's the quarterback of the future, let him work, or do you sit him down, let him catch his breath a little bit, have Mason Rudolph start some to try and get back in a winning way?
Yeah, and Brian Callahan went to the podium and addressed that, made it abundantly clear, Will is our guy.
That 100%. Yeah, Will's healthy. He's our quarterback. It was not a decision based on anything other than his health and protecting him, particularly with the bye week and the shoulder that didn't feel great. I didn't want to put him back out there, and I knew I was going to run the ball quite a bit. So that was really what it factored. But he's our starter when he's healthy, and we're ready to roll with him. Yeah, I mean, we'll do all the work on the precautionary stuff. I don't think it's going to be anything too serious other than just your normal AC style injury, but we'll see. I've been wrong before, so we'll wait till the MRI and all that gets done. But as of right now, I don't think it's a long-term issue for us.
So you heard it there, Dad. And while, listen, Will Levis, I think Bill Barnwell tweeted this last night, seems to play football like a movie quarterback at times, which isn't always great. Even the play he was injured on, it's admirable because he's straining to try and make a play happen, diving for a first down toward the pylon, but then landing on his shoulder. And this is a guy that seems like he's got a pretty high pain tolerance, and he looked like he was in considerable pain on the sideline. So you hope he's able to manage that going forward. But, Dad, I don't think there's any question. If you're the Titans, you structured your offseason to try and find out if this is the guy. You're not a team that I think roster-wise is built to win a ton of games this year. It's not like all of a sudden Mason Rudolph is going to unlock some massive ceiling. It took a Herculean effort for you to beat the tool-less Miami Dolphins that are struggling right now. So I don't think this is even a situation like we have in Carolina where it was so inept at quarterback and Andy Dalton offered you such an upgrade that you owed it to the rest of that team purely for the vibes around the organization to go out there and get it right. Mason Rudolph is a guy who's been around this league, yes, played football even as recently as last year as a starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he's never been a guy that's lit it up and certainly doesn't have the accolades that an Andy Dalton does to point to when you make that decision. So I didn't see anything last night that says that the Tennessee Titans should deviate from their main plan, which is figure out over the course of a season if Will Levis can be the guy, and then if he can't, then you address it in the offseason.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree 100% with that, is give him the rest of the season, unlike Bryce Young, who was not given the rest of the season to find out if he's going to be the quarterback there or not. But you got to find out and decide if you're going to hit the draft for a quarterback. And if he struggles and he's not going to be the guy, they're probably going to have a bad record and probably going to have a high pick. So that would bode well for getting your next quarterback. It's just it's always a shame for the rest of the guys in the locker room who another year has gone off their careers and it's been a horrible. Looks like it's going to be a bad year.
Well, it's a good reminder that there are no good days or bad days, just paydays. So, fellas, like Malik Willis said, as long as the checks still come on time, you can rest assured you can enjoy most of yours down in Tennessee. Let's get to the actual good game, because last night we saw something incredible. A performance from Jared Goff for the ages. The perfect game. Jared Goff ends up going 18 for 18 last night. Sets the NFL record for most pass attempts without a single incompletion in a game in NFL history. 292 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and even notches a receiving touchdown, Dad. Jared Goff can walk into the world this week saying that he had more receiving touchdowns than incompletions in their win against the Seahawks, in the total antithesis of the early game, an absolute shootout that they win 42-29. And, Dad, this was kind of what we expected. While Jared Goff's numbers are going to pop off the page, this was a game Detroit was able to win because of their ground attack and what you saw between these two running backs that have really become the foundation for this team.
Well, yeah, they ended up running for, 116 yards, averaging over 4 yards a carry, running it 28 times compared to the 18 passes by Jared Goff. And listen, that's the place to live. I mean, Seattle was missing, 3 linebackers, 2 D linemen, and then Julian Love in the secondary got hurt during the game and didn't come back. This defense was so depleted for Seattle that, and Detroit, obviously Ragnow wasn't starting at center, but this is a very good offensive line who you can lean on and just lean on them. And this was a game that never got more than 2 scores. It would be like Detroit would get up 2 scores, then Seattle would make it a 1-score game. But then instead of being able to tie it, Detroit would go up 2 scores, Seattle would make it a 1-score. Seattle did and had just enough mistakes. DK Metcalf fighting for extra yards and fumbling a ball, them getting a reception for a first down, but Lockett gets called for pass interference. Just enough mistakes to kind of keep them back.
Which was a lame call, by the way. And I'm not even one that wants to do it for, you can't call it in that moment, in that situation. All that stuff about he assumed a blocking posture, give me a break on that. I thought that was a terrible call in any moment of the game. But on that 4th down specifically, where that put the nail in the coffin, there was about 9 minutes minutes and 15 seconds left. The Seahawks completed what was supposed to be a first down pass to Jackson Smith and Jigba that would have gotten them. They were within 8. I think they were down 8 points at that point and driving to try and score and tie it with a 2-point conversion, and instead had to punt there, and then it was ball game.
Yeah, that's a down and distance where, quite honestly, let's be honest, refs are looking for the pick play. I mean, the pick play is so prevalent. I know offense doesn't call it a pick play, but as a defensive player, I call it a pick play because it's a pick play. It's just a matter of how good of an actor you can be at not showing that you're picking somebody. But the refs concentrate and look more in those down and distance situations because that's a prevalent play at that point.
Yeah, I just disagreed with the call at that spot or at any time based on how Tyler Lockett did go and sell it. And instead it led to a Detroit win. And, Dad, Detroit, we've talked about, is a team with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations this year. They were dealing with some injury of their own. Their center, Frank Ragnow, unfortunately, not able to be out there because yet another injury. This guy, one of the ultimate warriors in the NFL, played through damn near everything last year, but couldn't go. So they had to reshuffle their offensive line a little bit. The rushing numbers you mentioned weren't monster outputs, but in the spots that they needed to show up, you saw David Montgomery running over guys, Jahmyr Gibbs running around and through the defense. They were incredibly effective. Jamison Williams had the big touchdown. He continues to produce in some of the big play areas that we said could set this offense apart. All of those things were very impressive. I somehow came away from last night just as impressed with this Seahawks team that is no longer one of the unbeatens in the NFL. We mentioned them along with Kansas City and the Vikings were the last unbeatens in the NFL going into this game. They finally get a loss. But, Dad, you look at what they did, and especially Geno Smith, if he's not in your top 10 lists of quarterbacks currently playing right now, I don't know what you're missing out there. 38 of 56 for 395 in this game is emblematic of the fact that they were having to battle back from a deep hole, like you said, through most of this. But, man, we've talked about it. Going up against an Aiden Hutchinson-led defensive line, who Aiden Hutchinson, over the course of all those snaps, ended up with 10 pressures, an incredible output in this game. I thought the Seahawks offensive line overall, though, did a better job protecting. Part of that's the plan from Brian Grubb. But Geno Smith, buying time, making things happen, his ball placement, all these things, I walked away reminded that Geno Smith is, on his best day, still one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, despite the very circuitous story that he took around professional football. But also that this team under Mike McDaniel in year one seems to have already made up big strides in terms of offensively, that production with a new coordinator in there, but also defensively trying to make stops in critical moments, missing all of those key pieces you just mentioned.
Yeah, they were just kind of playing with one arm tied behind their back and still kept it within 2 scores. It would make it a 1-score game multiple times and had themselves in it. And rarely do you get a win when a quarterback is throwing 56 times, but they were in it. They got it down to 1 score, as I said, a number of times. They only ran the ball, 18, 19 times, but averaged 7 yards a carry. I'm sure they would have loved to have been more balanced in their attack, but they couldn't afford to, being down 2 scores a lot.
Yeah, I think that team, the biggest and best sign for them was Kenneth Walker comes back for his first game since week 18 of 2023, 12 carries for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. He looked 100%.
It was healthy. He's our quarterback. It was not
a legitimate difference maker in that game last night for an offense that the guard play had struggled. You saw them use a bit more 2 tight end last night to try and offset for that. And I think just seeing the way his athleticism popped off the page, that's a really good sign for that offense going forward. That's your point. As they seek more balance, that guy on the field, a legitimate difference maker that I think can cover up for some of your deficiencies up front.
And they're just such a heavy wide receiver team, too, right? To Metcalf, to Lockett, to Njigba. They had 20 receptions between them, over half of all the completions for Geno Smith. They have to be the most reliant on wide receiver receptions of any team in the NFL.
And let me tell you what, the most humbling image of last night probably came before the game as DK Metcalf, one of the most physically imposing wide receivers in the league, met with Megatron down on the field, Calvin Johnson, who, even with DK in full pads, absolutely dwarfed him. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's a good reminder that Calvin Johnson was and still is built different.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. It took an extra day, but the MLB playoffs are finally set after the Mets and Braves split the doubleheader on Monday. Champagne showers for both teams securing wild card spots. Diamondbacks left watching from home. Not ideal for MLB to have a doubleheader, and then both these teams fly to San Diego and Milwaukee respectively to play tomorrow. But fellas, other than building in a day to start Wednesday, not sure what else baseball could do in this situation. Just gonna be a tight one here for these guys.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Dad, that's unfortunate for the players involved given the timing, but you understand the larger life circumstances of a hurricane that have certainly made life so difficult for so many people. And obviously you're still thinking of everyone who's been affected by this as they begin the recovery process. And so it's one of those spots where, yes, you can feel bad in a sports sense a little bit, but I think that larger reminder looms over and will make it so everybody will go on about their business and just do the best they can.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, this is Mother Nature taking charge and just in a brutal way of real life as opposed to sports. But, sports did go on. The doubleheader went on. A sweep by one team would have had the Arizona Diamondbacks sitting at home watching be in the postseason. So they had to just watch as the Mets came back twice and won the first game. And the commissioner had said no champagne celebration after the first game because whoever won the first game was going to be in, but no champagne celebration because there's got to be a second game. And we don't want anybody coming out in champagne-soaked uniforms for the second game. So the Mets win the first one, coming back twice, and Chris Sale is supposed to start the second game for the Braves, but he has back spasms. Grant Holmes steps in, and about a half hour before the game finds out he's going to start. And for the Mets, they added left-hander Joey Lucchesi. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. To the roster for the second game. He had spent most of the year in AAA Syracuse. His only other big league start, he gave up 5 runs in 4 1/3 innings. So you're thinking, if you're a Diamondback, you're like, are you kidding me? You're bringing up a dude that's been in AAA. We need the Mets to win this, and they're throwing in the kid who'd been in AAA. And Joey actually threw well. He actually pitched really well against the Braves, who do end up winning 3-0. So they both end up getting in the wild card. And Arizona is just, as they sat and watched, they're just going to get to continue to sit and watch through the postseason.
Yeah, it's unfortunate if you're them. It's got shades of that Chargers-Raiders matchup at the end of the NFL season a couple of years ago, where if they tied, they both would have been in, and instead, the Raiders go on and do their thing. But or the Chargers, who won that game? Actually, I don't even remember. One of them won that game, and the other didn't get in. I don't remember who it was because I'm your son and I have a bad memory. But this Mets team, memorable one in the first game at the very least. Francisco Lindor, after a 6-run top of the 8th, comes in and belts the 2-run shot that gets them over the hump there. So, Dad, the Mets are going to roll into this thing feeling pretty good. Obviously going all the way back to Grimace throwing out the first pitch and what this team has done since then. They go on and get ready to take on the Brewers. The Brewers minus 135 at DraftKings Sportsbook, juice for the favorite in that series. So we'll get plenty to look forward to as the playoffs get ready to finally get going. I know you and I, not the biggest baseball fans in the world, but October baseball does look and feel different to finally have the clear stakes defined here. And we know the season-long quest. I think one thing that kind of went under-talked about as we had Shohei Ohtani make his way to the Los Angeles Dodgers is we do finally get to see him play postseason baseball. For everybody that watched him play in the World Baseball Classic and saw the joy, the great heightened intensity of him versus Mike Trout in that final of Japan versus the USA, now we get to see that guy playing meaningful baseball October, and if they have their, druthers about them, likely even further than that. So it's to me, just exciting to see that go on as we get ready to go. Just one of the things that we have to look forward to.
And it was always the hope that you'd see Shohei and Trout together in the postseason with the Angels, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. So Shohei has his 50-50 season as an incredible season, and possibly if they get to the World Series, will pitch, which would be unbelievable. But you're right. We get to continue to watch him, not this round, in the postseason as baseball plays. You're right. October baseball, that's when I definitely hone in.
And it's fun right now, too. Like, you get the wild card round starting today. So the Astros and the Tigers are the first to play up today, which, by the way, I saw the Tigers celebration over the weekend, too. Shout out to Jason Benetti, guy that you and I have both worked with over the years. Now working over as one of the voices of the Detroit Tigers, was with the White Sox, who somehow let him leave the building. And thank God that they did. So he was able to miss one of the worst seasons, or the worst season in Major League Baseball history, and go over and enjoy this. I saw them dumping champagne on him in the locker room after the game in celebration. Like, one of the best guys in our industry, one of the most unbelievable human beings, and it seemed like that organization recognizes what they have and appreciates it. So I'm glad he gets to get ready to embark on this postseason run with them on a personal note there, as they get to take on the Astros, the Royals, and the Baltimore Orioles. After that, the Mets and the Milwaukee Brewers, and then topping it off with the Braves out, as we mentioned, in San Diego to take on the Padres as the late game on ESPN starting at 8:30. So there will be plenty of that to look forward to. But, Jesse, we know yesterday for Major League Baseball, the biggest headline, the unfortunate passing of an all-time great in Pete Rose.
Yeah, Pete Rose passing away at the age of 83 years old. Of course, never reinstated, never inducted into the Hall of Fame, but remains the hit king, all-time leader in games played. So, his legacy in baseball is enduring.
Yeah, Dad, Pete Rose, calling him complicated probably is the undersell of the century, but from the baseball sense, he was very simple. He was one of the all-time greatest players to ever grace the diamond, a 17-time switch-hitting all-star. He was the National League MVP in 1973, the World Series MVP 2 years later, one of 3 World Series that he won. He owns the Major League record for games played, plate appearances, and the NL record for the longest hit streak. He also obviously has those 4,256 career hits. And so on the diamond, Dad, that Charlie Hustle nickname certainly well earned, as he was a guy that, were it not for what we know happened later on, the investigation that led to the 1989 lifetime ban for gambling on Major League Baseball during his time as a manager, including on the team he managed, the Cincinnati Reds, he would have been an easy walk-in lock Hall of Famer, and in most people's minds still is without that.
Yeah, I mean, there's now going to be brought up, is he going to get in now that the lifetime ban, because he passed away, is over? Will he get in? But he wasn't going to get in while he was living. I mean, there's been commissioner after commissioner that denied his reinstatement. One of the greatest players to ever play the game. You can't deny what he did on the field. Charlie Hustle, the way he played the game, the headfirst slides, even in the All-Star game, when the All-Star game was played for real, when he did the headfirst taking out of Ray Fosse, the catcher, in an All-Star game. I mean, he was Charlie Hustle. He ended up playing 5 different positions. I mean, you read the stats, and people can see the stats of the type of player that he was, but he did the cardinal sin of sports. I mean, it's on every wall in every locker room there is in sports. In big, bold letters, no gambling. And not only did he gamble, but he lied about it for years. It took till 2004 when he eventually changed his story and apologized for gambling on baseball, saying, once I started the lie, I had to continue with it. You wonder if he would have admitted to it right away, if there would have been, over time, forgiveness enough to put him in the Hall. But because he perpetuated the lie for so long, it wasn't going to happen. No commissioner on down the line was going to reinstate him. They weren't going to give him a chance to get back in. He literally made his own bed in '89 when he agreed to the banning from baseball. So he wasn't going to get in to the Hall of Fame. And he would kind of try and stick it to baseball every year in Cooperstown, where the induction would go on each year. He would, right down the street, hold an autograph session. There'd be a huge line of people lining up to get a Pete Rose autograph, as down the road the players were getting inducted into Cooperstown. So he kind of had an attitude about it when he was lying about it that really obviously turned people, or the decision makers, a sour feeling about Pete Rose. And it was probably too little too late with the 2004 apology, saying, yes, he bet on baseball and he apologized for it. Just one of the great careers of all time. And to not be, I mean, his numbers and some of his records are in Cooperstown, are in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. But I wonder now, again, it's weird to say now that the lifetime ban is over, will he end up getting in posthumously? I don't know.
I don't know either, and it's one of those things, Dad, that, maybe for, loved ones he's left behind, that could be certainly something of value still, although, man, the sting of that happening after he's gone might also go the other way in terms of the feelings it could elicit. It's one of those things, though, after a while where the conversation is so overreaching. Like, outside of this, the only other conversation we have like this where it's so outwardly obvious to everyone that the resume is Hall of Fame worthy would be Barry Bonds and a lot of the players from the steroid era that have been denied access because they're involved in that as well. Roger Clemens, who you mentioned too, where hey, this is so obviously one of the greatest players that have ever played the game. I get that the Hall is something that these guys still covet, but there's nobody alive who looks at them as not a Hall of Famer outside of the people who are actually tasked with voting in it. Like, Pete Rose is not going to be a name that baseball forgets because of his on-field accomplishments just because he's not in the Hall of Fame. In fact, somehow it's even heightened, to your point, by the fact that he's not, the fact that you get that juxtaposition of him down the street doing autograph signings, the fact that every year when Barry Bonds was on the ballot and not getting in, we talk about him more than almost anyone going in, to the point where people think it's unfair to the folks actually getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, that at some point, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the legacy is so secured that I don't think it's as impactful as someone who might be on the fringe who all of a sudden gets that bump of being named into the Hall of Fame and gets their resume read aloud a few more times.
Yeah, you're right. There are some big names who are on the outside looking in, but they do get talked about a lot. And the difference for me with the steroids is there was a steroid era. And by the way, Barry Bonds had Hall of Fame numbers before he was popped for, well, they're tested positive, but went through the steroid situation. And I just think it was a steroid era that you could easily, signify in the Hall of Fame that it was a steroid era, but these two guys had the stats to be in the Hall of Fame, but they're not going to get in because now it's to the old-timer vote, and they're not going to vote them in. So with Pete Rose and gambling, it wasn't a gambling era, though there may have been other players or in this case managers that gambled, but not to the height of the ability that Pete Rose had and the Hall of Fame playing career that he had. But yeah, you definitely have some greatest of all time players on the outside looking in that they do get talked about actually more. You're right. Each year when they were coming up for the vote, and I don't know how it ends for any of them. I mean, I think all of them will end up, with the old timer vote, the old writers vote, the past 15 years, I think you have the chance to get voted in of who the vote goes to. I don't think they're getting in. And then would Pete Rose get reinstated to even possibly get voted in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, those are all things that will hang in the balance, and I'm with you. I think the technicality of the language in this case is going to be something interesting for people to watch. But, again, Pete Rose was a no-doubter on the field and then a very complicated legacy off the field. I mean, we talk about the gambling aspect of it that became the moniker for this player post-playing career, but you also had in 2017 an unidentified woman in court documents alleging that Rose had a sexual relationship with her before she turned 16 and later admitted in those documents to acknowledging having a relationship with her when she was 16, which was the legal age of consent in Ohio. So these things, Dad, certainly make it difficult to talk about someone even in a moment like this after they've passed.
Yeah, it was certainly a complicated life, but a no doubt Hall of Fame career on the field, and no doubt he agreed to a lifetime ban in 1989. So he basically sealed his own fate as far as getting into the Hall of Fame at that point, unless he was reinstated. And as I mentioned, there wasn't going to be a commissioner that was going to reinstate him.
No, certainly not, but it still doesn't change the fact that Pete Rose, to many, will be missed and was a life loss yesterday. So rest in peace to one of the all-time greats in Major League Baseball, Pete Rose.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's talk some college football, fellas. So over in the Big Ten, all the top-ranked teams took care of business over the weekend. Okay, Michigan holds on. Penn State takes care of a ranked Illinois team at home. Oregon, Ohio State, USC all win by a couple touchdowns here. So we've only seen Michigan and USC with the big out-of-conference games. So we know how they're going to stack up with the SEC, right, fellas? But maybe in the future we could have a better idea early on of how these matchups are going to go. Reports say conferences are looking into a scheduling partnership. I think we got news originally of this like back in August, but now it seems like it's coming to fruition. How do you guys feel about this deal?
Yeah, we did. This is, one of these things, a lot of these college football business moves simmer for a while, but Heather Dinich over at ESPN reporting yesterday that the Big Ten and SEC athletic directors are going to discuss this even further in an in-person meeting in Nashville, Tennessee next week. Multiple sources confirmed to ESPN. So, Dad, they're working on a joint scheduling initiative between the two conferences who we saw produced some of the biggest and best and biggest helmet sticker matchups during the early portion of the season this year. But along with this, and the headline that I think rattled most people, was the report out there that both of these schools had floated, and sources told ESPN Monday that these two conferences would prefer 4 automatic bids each in whatever version of the college football playoff exists going forward. And, Dad, that changes the dynamic a whole lot in the way that is wholly unsurprising for anybody with eyes and who understands what governs these decisions. Money, 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 money.
That's ridiculous for them to now they'd say 4 may be too much. But I mean, they can ask for whatever they want. They're the two most powerful conferences, so who knows if they'll get it or not. Now, quickly, as far as the scheduling, one of the things that would have to change, the SEC would have to go to a 9-game conference schedule because the Big Ten is already there, and as the Big Ten said, you want to be on equal footing with that. But you're right, that's not the headline. The headline is a couple of things: guaranteeing spots and trying or basically wanting to do away with the 13-person committee, the subjective views of human beings to not let them have their bids. So yeah, that definitely is the headline, that they would like automatic bids. And they would like the abolishment, or I guess would be the term, of the 13-person committee, which quite honestly would not bug me outside of the fact that when I'm done with broadcasting, I want to be on the 13-person committee. So I'd like it to hang around long enough to be on it. But every year they do the 13-person committee, the rankings, and they go to the old BCS rankings, the computer rankings, and they're virtually the same. They're virtually the same with humans doing it or computers doing it. So to me, if you got rid of the 13-person committee, it wouldn't be that big of a deal if you went back to a BCS and computer-type ranking. But you can't guarantee slots. You can't guarantee 3 or 4 slots for 2 conferences, can you?
I mean, we're going to find out because they're going to do it. Like, I this has kind of been where all roads I thought would lead as this went on.
But doesn't there have to be a vote? I mean, there is technically 2 other major conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, and the Pac-12 is looking to get back to being the Pac-12. And I know the group of 5s don't have a lot to say, but I mean, can they just, the 2 of them, say yeah? Because again, in 26 it's talking about going to a 14-team playoff. Can 2 conferences just say we're getting 4 automatic bids? I mean, there has to be some vote or some conversation or something with the other schools not involved with the SEC and the Big Ten.
This is one of those might makes right situations where I believe, well, yes, and in the contract it sounds like there are protections in place for the ACC, for the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 conference champions, Notre Dame and the highest ranked Group of 5 team for now. We know for a while that's been subject to change. The Group of 5 commissioners, Dad, remember, had that G5 summit before the season got started where they started talking through contingency plans of if we get boxed out of this because the big players decide they don't want to share a seat at the table just out of the kindness of their heart, which is not a thing that happens in this sport, what are we going to do? Because that would be a massive loss of income for the Group of 5, Dad. The payouts for the college football playoff and making this expanded playoffs are one of the things that some of these Group of 5 schools are counting on as they do the budgeting going forward. And while listen, this is a complicated thing for me because when we talk about subsidizing other groups in the world of college athletics, for years that's been the job of football on a given campus, where we say football funds the rest of these sports in a way that at a base level I find unfair as we have a player compensation conversation, where it's, oh, you don't want to play football players or basketball players what you think they're owed because traditionally they've funded other sports when fair's a place they judge pigs. Like, if they're worth that and it costs you other sports, then unfortunately there's a part of me that wonders if we can really continue with that system. It's the same thing happening here where you would be asking the higher levels of the sport to subsidize another level. But, man, there's just something that feels different enough about it to where I would feel some type of way, especially in the midst of this season we're having, Dad, where we know that right now more than ever, the wealth disparity in college football, big as it's been in a while. We've talked about how Group of 5 schools have been turned into a pseudo-farm system for some of these Power 4 institutions, and yet we've got a Boise State team right now with a legitimate Heisman contender and the nation's leading rusher in Ashton Jeanty, whose only loss in the season was a 3-point loss to an Oregon team we think could win a national title this year. You've got UNLV, who just had their quarterback drop out after 3 games and went out there and still blew the doors off one of their conference opponents in Fresno State and has 2 Power 4 wins this year and is in the mix for the Group of 5 spot in the playoff. You've got teams going out in the field and proving they deserve a shot at this thing. And so it would be a bummer to see, even if this always felt inevitable, because we know the Big Ten and the SEC are playing a different level of ball than everybody else.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Group of 5 is going to get left out if the Big Ten and SEC are talking about basically leaving out the ACC and the Big 12. They're talking about being a Power 2 and then drop down some rungs to the next Power 2 and then drop down more rungs to the Group of 5. I mean, listen, I get it where they're talking might makes right and they're going to get to make the decisions, but there has to be and there has to be checks and balances to this thing where they just can't run roughshod over everybody else.
Where are those going to come from? The people running the sport that don't exist? Like, that's the unfortunate part of this we've always talked about is college football has no one to answer to. They just have the groups there. And you've talked about this as much as anybody, Dad. These conferences almost never play nice. Like, when I see the words scheduling alliance, anything surrounding alliance with college football conferences, you know that only goes as far as it's conducive and convenient for both sides of that. And eventually, if that's not the case, like even the notion that the Big Ten wants the SEC to change their regular season scheduling, I'm like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, listen, you might be on, the same footing as them relative to the other conferences, but do we even see that continuing based on the SEC's level of dominance recently? Like, there still feels like they're staring a bit down at the Big Ten in terms of that. So I don't know, Dad, the longer I've been around all of this, the more I've realized that something like this always felt inevitable. And there's part of you that can justify it, right? Like this idea where I don't think 4 automatic bids for that conference is the right answer either, but also having it the way it is now with the automatic conference qualifiers and with what's going to happen eventually with the Group of 5, where if one of these teams isn't ranked in the top 12, they're going to bump a team from the top 12 that was looked at based on their accomplishment as one of the 12 best teams in the sport, and that team's going to get bumped. And I'm going to feel badly for that team who got knocked out for going out there and accomplishing and getting knocked out because of the rule and the structure. Like, we're still not picking the quote-unquote 12 best teams as we forge ahead in this college football playoff era, but we're trying to do something that's more inclusive of more teams in the sport in a way that I do think is a net positive for the game, even if it's not rewarding the fairest version of events to pick a champion.
So how about you get rid of the subjectivity of the 13-person committee, you go back to the computers, because computers don't have any subjectivity to them, and you just take the top 14 teams. You just take the top 14, regardless of 4, if there's Big 4, the Power 4, regardless of the champs being 1, 2, 3, 4. Just take the top 12, the top 14 teams, if it's a 14-team playoff, and go down that road. Make it simple.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that would make the most sense to me and to you, I think, with our brains being operated by, hey, we played at a college at Notre Dame that was an independent, so none of this conference stuff mattered to us. But there's a lot of these people trying to hold on to the remnants of conference championships are supposed to mean something. Because all of a sudden, if you just make it the top 12 or 14 teams and that conference title doesn't influence seeding in any way, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of teams and there's probably teams now already going, hey, how much is it worth for us to play in blank title game, to have that extra game of wear and tear if we're already going to be a team that's in range of making the playoff? If we play in the Big Ten of the SEC and we're one of those teams, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, we all assume, hey, from the SEC, probably getting into this thing at this point based on what we've seen this year, even knowing the difficult schedule that lays ahead for a team like Georgia. And so if you're one of those teams and you get left out of the SEC title, yeah, you're not getting the first round bye, but are you feeling the worst about that situation? I don't know at this point. And so for some people, that might already create a conflict in terms of what does it mean to win a conference championship when you're a school of that station. For others, it might still matter, but for them, I question that already. You would just be throwing that out completely if you went to that model for the expanded playoff.
Yeah, you would. So, I mean, listen, it's not the only option. I mean, another option would be take the conference champs and give them the bye that they're doing now, and then let the computer pick the rest. I mean, I know you and I come at it from an independent Notre Dame standpoint, but I mean, there's the bottom line is Group of Five is always going to get left out. Group of Five got left out in the BCS era. The Group of Five basically got left out, save for Cincinnati, in the committee era. But I know Boise State has been threatening there some of the times, but.
I guess left out in a relative sense, like they didn't play for a title. But to your point, Cincinnati was able to break through in the 14 college football playoff era in a way people didn't predict. They are now a group of Power 4 team in the Big 12. But even before that, Cincinnati was a team that got to play in one of the, New Year's Six bowl games back when we had the BCS bowl games. It wasn't the title, but we saw them play in those. We mentioned some of the other teams because we did have a spot for the highest ranked Group of Five team. Even in that, there's always kind of been an acknowledgement from the people in power in the sport in previous iterations of this thing that, hey, it'd be good to include this whole other portion of the sport that's tremendously important. It's the same reason why you've seen coaches for the years talk about they take a lot of these pay games because at one point they were that coach at a Group of Five school or at an FCS school who needs that money to go a long way in funding the program. And so a lot of those coaches, in addition to getting an easy win for the team, I'm not going to make it sound like total altruism here, but there's at least an acknowledgement that these other parts of the sport matter that I worry we're marching closer to losing every day.
Well, yeah, because right now it's like you'll sacrifice one for the Group of Five, right? Because right now Boise State is the highest ranked Group of Five at 21, and then UNLV is tied for 25th. So they would knock out, if the rankings were now the top 12, they would knock out Ole Miss. So somebody does get axed because of it. And right now, the power conferences are willing to sacrifice one of their own, which is what it's going to be. It's going to be a Power 4 team that's sitting at 12 that gets ousted for a Group of Five.
It is. And I always thought it was going to take the wrong team being ousted in that spot. The same way we saw the rules in the NFL change for overtime when Patrick Mahomes and the Bills
Josh
played
Allen
in the playoffs, and we didn't get to see one of our fun football boys hold the ball at the end of the game. We talked about this with Caitlin Clark not getting to host a WNBA postseason game for the Fever because they got swept. Would that change it? I thought it was going to be having the wrong brand ousted from the playoff in that 12 spot. We might not even get to that point. They might just be looking around and saying, yeah, you know what, we did this for a year and it's cute, but we're going to go out here and throw our weight around because we can.
I agree. I think if the option is including more Group of Five or basically slicing them out, it's going to be slicing them out because that's more room for an SEC or a Big Ten team, according to Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the two commissioners of those conferences.
Yeah, and again, in lieu of anyone governing the sport, those are going to be the people with the most seats at the table and the most votes for how this plays out going forward. So again, the reports from Heather Dinich at ESPN that those meetings about a scheduling alliance and the future seating and structure of the college football playoff is going to be going on next week. As, oh, by the way, we still get football played this weekend. Praise Jesus.
Check out this new feature over on DKNetwork.com. We've got all the live and up-to-date betting splits from DraftKings Sportsbook. The page is free to use, so head on over there for all of your betting info. So let's take a look at Thursday night's NFC South matchup. Falcons the home favorite, but the Bucs are taking 54% of the handle, 77% of the bets, and of course, we're looking for the over, 78% of the bets on that. Keep that bookmarked, and we will see how it changes. Lines and odds are subject to change. A change for us is that Charlotte Wilder going to be joining the program coming up next, and a change for Knicks fans perhaps, as a new cat is on the prowl in the big city.
Well, we know there's plenty of NFL action, college football action that we can still get to here. We're also in a great time of year as the calendar turns to October. Not only is it socially acceptable for me to go to the grocery store and buy a bag of candy corn now and absolutely house that thing, or for you to put up Halloween decorations and get going, meet a thought around in a little Pop-Tart costume, all those things are acceptable. We also have NBA Media Days kicking off. As the season is right around the corner, we are getting close to sports equinox time, and that makes it the perfect time to bring in our friend Charlotte Wilder for a Wilder Wednesday on a Tuesday. Charlotte Wilder, who you can catch the co-host of Oddball with her and Amin El-Hassan every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network. Char, what's going on, bud?
Oh, my God. I'm so happy to be with you guys. And as someone who talks about the NBA on this here network, I am really, really glad that we have some media day stuff happening because, you know, in the NBA, the September, August, you're sort of like, okay, somebody needs to do something crazy, which might not be in their best interest, but might be in our best interest so that we can talk about it. But now we have league sanctioned craziness because that's what's coming out of these things. But I'm thrilled to be here with you guys as always.
League sanction craziness. I mean, really, so far, it's been pretty wholesome content, I feel like, coming out of media days. It was always going to be hard to get away from the orbit of friend of the program, LeBron James and Bronny being on stage. Somehow cuter than I anticipated, the two of them up there riffing. I think Myron Metcalf pointed this out the other day, Charlotte. This is like the happiest LeBron has looked in a setting that's not the All-Star game with Steph Curry in some time.
Or the Olympics in the gold medal game. No, you're right. You know, and I think that like I was not prepared for it to be this cute. I was not prepared for them to look this happy. I was not prepared. You talk about LeBron. I was not prepared for Bronny to look as happy as he did. Senior, he was up there. You know, I'm gonna be so bold as to say that LeBron James and LeBron James Jr. I am sitting in between Mike Golic and Mike Golic Jr. And the vibes are not dissimilar. They're giving each other a hard time. They're one's joking about being old. The other one's like, I have enough time with you. I mean, you guys were the original cute senior and junior, so you should really be taking a little bit more credit than you are, I think.
Yes. And we told that to LeBron when we had him on, that he should take our experience as a father-son team. What I love about it is I love as a dad and just enjoying your child's success. I love the way LeBron is dealing with it because who knows when Bronny will be on the. I mean, it's not like when Mike was sitting in a chair next to me. Mike was sitting in a chair next to me. He was on the show. Where Bronny, you know, we're not sure when they'll actually play together, and they obviously haven't yet. So I didn't know if LeBron would be a little more, well, you know, let's wait till it happens, you know, let's not rush things. But I'm glad he's embraced it because I don't know if we have yet understand how cool this is. That one man played long enough in the NBA to not only play long enough, but to be one of the greatest of all time to do it and have his son now not only playing in the league, but to be a Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr., because we have had this before with Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. In Seattle, where I believe it was Seattle, where they played on the same team. I mean, it has to be appreciated. It's so unbelievably out there that it could possibly happen that when I would get in the league that you could play long enough that your kid would be in said league as well. It doesn't seem possible yet. Obviously, it's happened a couple of times. So I'm glad that LeBron is really embracing it.
Yeah, he really does seem to be, and it's one of those things that because it's LeBron James, I do think at some point we go numb to the insane level of accomplishment he's exuded across all parts of his basketball career. And certainly that extends to this, where he's stated this as a goal for so long that I think because it's LeBron James, we're never surprised anymore when he reaches goals like this, no matter how absurd they tend to be. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about the family reunion that's going on in the Lakers facility here. But, Charlotte, we got to talk about your New York Knicks, who are trying to tear the Villanova family apart, apparently, right now. While the trade hasn't fully been executed yet, we know some of the big news over the weekend was Karl Anthony Towns reportedly on the move from Minnesota, getting ready to join the New York Knicks in exchange for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So I'm sure you guys have already gotten the chance to talk about this on Oddball. Everyone can obviously check out your reactions there. But what was your first thought when you saw this over the weekend, Charlotte?
My first thought, Amin sent it to our Oddball group chat, and my first thought was, is this real? Because I have gotten got by NBA Cental enough times in my life to know when I need to double check something. And I was like, this came out of nowhere. You know, I think last year what was so great about the Dame trade is that it gave us an off season of like, is it going to happen? When Damian Lillard was going to Milwaukee, it was like, okay, is it today? Is it tomorrow? It gave us the content train was rolling. With this, it came out of nowhere, for me at least. I'm sure there were people who had some idea that this was happening. But, you know, also, we had talked last week about, like, Mitchell Robinson gets hurt, center for the Knicks, and I'm like, what are they going to do? They got rid of Isaiah Hartenstein, who is an unbelievable center for them last year, and they just couldn't pay him. So that, you know, it's not really their fault on that one. But, like, it literally makes you scratch your head because you're like, what was your plan? And then it turns out that Leon Rose and company actually did have a plan, but it was such a Cat is so not the kind of player that you would expect to see in New York. You know, he is not the like hard-nosed New York, New Jersey basketball, you know, even though he's from New Jersey. So there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, Mike, but I think the best way to sum up how I have the best Knicks reaction that I've gotten is the day after this trade is announced to be reportedly happening. We go to a coffee shop, and the first thing the barista said, my husband is wearing his Knicks hat. The first thing the coffee guy says, he doesn't ask like, what can I get you? He said, how do you feel about Cat? And my husband was we were both caught off guard because, you know, you're expecting like, would you like a cold brew or a hot coffee? And you get, how do you feel about Cat? And my husband was like, you know, still processing, but like seems good. Think it's going to be great. And he goes, I hate Cat. And I was like, oh my, that was like, there are welcome to the league moments. And then there are welcome to New York moments that players are not even there for. And that was Karl Anthony Towns' welcome to New York moment, as far as I'm concerned, Mike.
Yeah, Dad, this is one of those things where I do think the personality fit of it is going to matter at some point. It won't matter right away because Karl's a very good player, but the pun is fully intended here. He's a cat going to a place that likes dogs, and he's a guy that has tried to cosplay that for a while, and I don't know if it's been believable. And if there's, one thing that New York is not going to tolerate, it's someone doing something that they don't think is necessarily genuine to them. So I'm fascinated to see how that's going to mix.
One thing that I will say, though, is I think everybody might be a little hard on Cat in terms of he's coming in. He had Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. Obviously, everybody knows that. Ant is a generational player and very young. What Amin was talking about yesterday that I thought was very smart is if Karl Anthony Towns buys into Jalen Brunson being the level of player that Anthony Edwards is, which I believe he is. I think what Jalen Brunson has done is one of the most incredible feats we've seen in a second round pick, a small guy playing. He was at one point last year the best maybe player in the East at a certain point. And so if Karl Anthony Towns can buy into that, if Jalen Brunson can bring him in and make him feel like he is a part of this team and make him feel that same buddy comedy vibe that Cat had with Ant, I think then you're starting to have the personality thing becomes less of an issue. It's going to be like, it's going to be the media. It's going to be us. Like, we're going to be the problem for Cat. So I think team-wise, I do see a way. Well, the fans are always a problem. And I say that with all the love in my heart. But Senior, that to me is sort of where there is an on-ramp to this situation.
It's always interesting when a player goes to a New York team, the talk of their personality and dealing with the media and dealing with the fans. And it is definitely, emphasized with KAT, who comes, they pick up a big contract and Minnesota gets rid of a big contract. And, of course, the Knicks lost 2 centers, one to Memphis, one to injury. I don't believe Robinson's coming back till December. So it will be how they all can play. It's amazing because while you have the NBA players have the most power over their contracts, they also basically have the personalities, the biggest personalities. On and off the court as well. So how he deals with it in New York, one of the better teams in the East. And then for Minnesota, one of the top teams in the West, they get rid of a big man, they get rid of a big contract. Chris Finch coached in New Orleans, was on the bench there when Julius Randle was in New Orleans, so we had some familiarity with him. DiVincenzo was the third best three-point shooter in the league. So, I mean, that's value for your contract there for him to be in the rotation. So, everybody's going to talk about the New York side, the Knicks side, the KAT side, but for the Minnesota side, who was close last year, is this a plus or a minus?
Both of these teams were close last year. Like Minnesota, albeit got a little bit closer, but these are both championship contending teams on their side of the ledger. And on one side for Minnesota, yeah, Dad, we've talked about it. We had Carl before we had Rudy Gobert come there, and I sort of said it was like that one plant that's wilting a bit, and you needed the stake in the back to sort of hold it up. Rudy Gobert went inside and did the dirty work so that Carl could go and operate behind the three-point arc and do the things he wanted to do while Anthony Edwards took over as the alpha of that team. Charlotte on the other side of this now, seeing how they operate in a world where Karl Anthony Towns, yeah, there might be things about his game we wish were different, but he's still a guy as a big that spaces the floor in a way that modern offenses incredibly benefit from. And now Minnesota loses the benefit of that. And while the exchange for him and Isaiah Hartenstein and company there is not equal in terms of the way that they impact the team, the New York Knicks guys at the press conference yesterday, they couldn't really talk about this because it's not a deal that's been executed, but they talked in generalities about what he represents, and they said it can change the floor dynamic a lot to have a big that can draw defenders out of the paint like that, especially when a guy like Jalen Brunson is the leader on your team.
Totally. I mean, I think actually the Knicks were the team that spaced the floor the least last year. Everybody collapsed around Brunson. The Celtics obviously spaced the floor the most. This is, I mean, really what you have is like, this is a match for Kristaps Porzingis. This is, which ironically, the Knicks drafted him. But what the Knicks had to do, you just couldn't go up against a Boston, which potentially could be the Eastern Conference Finals matchup. I mean, I tend to think it won't be because I think that the obvious thing in sports that you go into, usually something gets a little funky. And obviously the Sixers fans are screaming at me being like, What about us? But what about you? So I think that what they've done is really, really smart. I think what gets lost in a lot of the conversation here about, KAT with Tom Thibodeau, the coach who he was there in Minnesota, they didn't necessarily get along with the personality stuff, is that Karl Anthony Towns is a generational player. He's an unbelievable player. What he can do at center and the way that he can hit threes, the ways he can space the floor, this opens up. Maybe we haven't even seen the best of Jalen Brunson yet. And that to me, Mike, is just the most exciting part of all of it. Is like what this unlocks. Incredible.
I'll answer quickly about what about Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia finishes higher than the Knicks this year. Embiid lost 25, 30 pounds. Now, again, doesn't mean you're going to stay healthy, but it's an effort to try and stay healthy through the year. Paul George, I think, was a huge pickup, and their window isn't open long. That's for sure. And obviously with Tyrese Maxey, it's open longer for him. But as far as the trio together, I think I think the three of them are going to have a hell of a year.
Yeah, that to me is the most interesting part. To Charlotte's point, it's going to be styles make fights in the East. And what Karl represents is something that is more akin to what you get from Kristaps, who did give a renewed effort towards his post presence last year when he was healthy, and it was a big part of the conversation about him. But the matchup with Embiid is different. The matchup with Giannis in Milwaukee going to be different. Bam in Miami, it's going to be a lot of very interesting different body types at big, all of a sudden at home in the Eastern Conference together, trying to slug it out and see how this goes. Coming up next, we will pay our respects to an all-time NBA big who we lost far too soon yesterday. Next year on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Charlotte Wilder here with us. Sad day in the NBA community. Dikembe Mutombo passed away at 58 after battling brain cancer. An NBA Hall of Famer, of course, but because he had this huge impact across the world as well, here's Raptors. Raptors president Masai Ujiri on the loss of Mutombo.
It's hard for us to be with that guy, without that guy. You have no idea what Dikembe Mutombo meant to me. He made us who we are. That guy is a giant, an incredible person. Yeah, who are we without Dikembe Mutombo? He did so much for us, for the continent of Africa, for his people, because he set a path for us that, you know, I don't know many people that can do it.
Really emotional, you guys. And Dikembe, of course, NBA's first global ambassador, so his impact on the sport across the world just huge.
Yeah, Dad Charlotte, this was someone, first off, at 58 years old and had been battling brain cancer for the last 2 years, gone far, far too soon, but a literal and metaphorical giant in the game, someone whose player resume, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, 8-time All-Star, led the league in reboundings twice, blocks 3 times, all of those things are fine, but when you hear people like Masai Ujiri, who, born of a Nigerian father and a Kenyan mother, my former coworker Chineye Agwumike yesterday, especially when you hear, players of African descent, people around basketball, and what he meant to that entire continent and the work that he did there, not only representing them the way he did as a man and as a player here, but what he did after. He was instrumental in the development of basketball's Africa League. He went back to his home country in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and built a hospital in his hometown there that's helped in giving back to so many people. And so Charlotte, just a legacy that touched so many people in such a wide range, and what seems like an incredible human being.
I mean, I think it's so important when somebody comes along who, we talk a lot in sports about athletes are role models. And I think recently there's been a lot of conversation about, are they? Like, what do they owe fans? What do they, and the truth is nothing. But when someone like Mutombo comes along and takes it upon himself to try to make the game that he loves a more inclusive, equitable, better place, to give people a chance who haven't had a chance, to be the global ambassador. He did work with Basketball Without Borders. People like Luol Deng, the South Sudanese, the head coach of the South Sudanese team that did so well in the Olympics this year, that he really, he made out of nothing. That program didn't exist. He has said that Mutombo it is the reason he does it, because if you see somebody doing something, if you see somebody acting out what they believe in and doing it so authentically and understanding what matters, like understanding where the important things are in this world, and then leading from a point of that understanding. I think it's the role model is, there is nothing performative. There is nothing lip servicey. It is so real and true, and it's so rare. And I think that's why you see, people like Ujiri being just so devastated, because what this guy did was show people what's possible, which is really, I mean, that's the highest compliment you can give someone. And he was also funny. He was playful. He was such a delight to so many people. And I think a lot of times when people pass away, there's this feeling that it's very somber because it's so sad. But I also think to honor who those people were in their lives, it's so important to be like, he was also an absolute delight. And isn't that just, that's huge, right? So it's a huge loss. But what he gave this world in basketball was such a massive gain, senior.
He was a better person than a basketball player, right? And he was a Hall of Fame basketball player. And you can say that about some, certainly not all. We're in an era of social media where the player, like when I played, you kind of just knew the player as the player. You saw the player when he did a news interview or God forbid, a newspaper interview, and that's how you got to know them. Now, players are owning their own brand, so you see the player, and we see both good and bad in player. They're out there. But with Dikembe, there's literally no bad. I mean, he was such a genuine person. Spoke 9 languages, by the way. But a genuine person who started the Dikembe Mutombo Foundation in '97, and you hear the tributes from those who know him, obviously far better than we know of him, talking about what he gave to the game, what he gave to the world, the people that he helped the game certainly, but helped people in the world who needed help. I mean, just an incredible human being. That his son said, "My dad is my hero because he simply cared." I mean, that's kind of it. He cared, and he was in a position, and he did something about caring. He just didn't say, "I care. Boy, I care about what's going on." He cared And he did. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
Doesn't get any better than that. And, Dad, what you brought up about the era that Dikembe came up in, I think is also very important because, to Charlotte's point, he was incredibly funny, was incredibly charismatic. And when I think of Dikembe Mutombo, there are all of these great things. But I also think of the clip that I saw get circulated from Highly Questionable the other day where he comes up in an era where things are more folklore than they are verifiable, where social media would have outed things like this years ago. And instead, we get to relive him going on Highly Questionable to quell the rumors of the Who Wants to Sex Mutombo stories from back in the day in the clubs, walking in there and loudly proclaiming that at the start of the night, and to just watch how well he played with that, like something that a lot of people might bristle at, he looked at and he laughed at with Dan and Bomani and just went right on through. But, Dad, those are the kind of things when you don't have this level of, I won't even call it intimacy, it's almost invasive the way that we exist with each other now. We know too much about each other. Having a moment like that just sort of embodies, Charlotte, to your point, he's a round character. Like, we don't have to flatten Dikembe Mutombo and make today some complete. It is sad because he has gone too early, but my God, the light that he brought and the levity in all these situations. I saw the video of him on with Conan sucking helium out of a balloon to try and do a Curly impression from the Three Stooges. Like, the guy had incredible range, and that is exceeding far off what he did on the basketball court.
I also think that that's a testament to him. You know, you lose people, but they live on in your memory, which is maybe the most cliche thing you could say, but it's also how you keep people alive. It's by remembering them as the full people they are. And I think sometimes that's more difficult. But with Dikembe, it's not. With Dikembe, everything that he brought was light, it was uplifting, it was helping other people. And, you know, it's really beautiful, and we're gonna keep telling those stories for a long time.
And I think when somebody is that well liked and that fun, like you mentioned, Mike, that fun, and also helps people, he brings more people to help. More people want to help him help people because of what a good guy he is. There are those that will just, you know, go in front of a camera occasionally and say, "Hey, I'm doing this and helping this," and not really be involved. Well, he was involved. He was involved, but he also had that great personality, that fun-loving personality where you wanted to be around him, and he exuded that personality, and you wanted to be part of his world, and part of his world was helping others. So he actually got others to help him, help those, you know, in Africa, by just being the genuinely good person that he is. It's and I mean 58 is just ridiculously early. I mean, hopefully his foundation will go on, the help will go on. I'm sure it will. I'm sure he has plenty of people that will help that go on. But now, unfortunately, it will be in his memory, as well as helping those who he has helped. But it's a sad day. You know, normally if you talk about someone who passes in their 80s or their 90s, you celebrate the life of, and say, boy, they had a good life. But for Dikembe at 58, it's ridiculously early. I'm sure, as he would say, I have still so much more to do. But I think he can rest easy knowing there will be people that will pick up where he left off and continuing to do the good that he's doing.
Yeah, I think the line is, what is grief if not love persevering? And I think there's a lot of people that will persevere on behalf of Dikembe Mutombo and what he has meant in this life. So, again, rest in peace, a legend gone far too soon, Dikembe Mutombo, passing away at the age of 58 years old. And while we certainly mourn that and continue the legacy, we know there's also always no easy transition for these things back into talking about the normal world of sports. And so we'll try and put that pause in and do just that here, Charlotte, as we do always enjoy getting to pick your brain when you come around here, not just about basketball, but about football, and we always find our way to the New England Patriots with you. We got a little bit of former Patriot news, though. Tom Brady, a guy that you well know this weekend, little verbal spat with Baker Mayfield. Were you surprised that Tom Brady got as hot and bothered by Baker Mayfield's comments that he was brought down to Tampa to be himself and to bring some fun back into an organization, that it gotten a little bit stuffy? I'm paraphrasing there on Baker's behalf in reference to Tom Brady's years in uniform there.
Yes and no, Mike. I was I was thrilled, to be honest, when this happened, because first of all, two things happened. We got vintage Baker Mayfield and we got vintage we got vintage Baker Mayfield and we got new Tom Brady. New Tom Brady to me started in 2020 when he was no longer with the Patriots and he just started talking and he started posting on social media more. And you were like, oh, does he have a sense of humor? It's like, maybe. He also has a really good social media team. But what Baker Mayfield said was that everybody was stressed out when he came into that building, that Tom Brady had a high intensity, high strung environment and he was brought in to bring the fun back to football. Which, first of all, calls into question all of these things. Of like everyone always saying that New England, that culture was Belichick. It's like, well, was it also Brady? If this is what Baker Mayfield's saying. Also, Baker Mayfield coming in and being like, well, the greatest of all time was here and they got a ring and it was just exhausting for everyone. So they brought me in when he had completely flopped with the Browns. He's obviously been playing better. This is a guy, Baker Mayfield, who grabbed his nether regions and planted a flag at the Rose Bowl. Like we haven't seen that. This is Baker Mayfield, who in his first year in the league had like the blacklist of media members he didn't like. We're getting a little spice out of Baker. And the fact that Tom Brady on the broadcast was like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought being stressed out was not having Super Bowl rings. And it was just, it was everything that I like about sports. It was messy. It was people taking the bait. It was the competitive nature of Tom Brady being absolutely unable not to say something. It was a microcosm of all the things that I really get excited about.
And it was Baker Mayfield just being truthful about the situation. I don't think anything was taken out of context at all.
Which is what he claimed.
Yes, he claimed it was taken out of context. I don't think it was taken out of context. And after Brady said what he said in the booth, Kevin Burkhardt, as his partner, said, the competitive juices are still flowing. And Brady responded, still in there, no apologies. And you were like, damn, okay. So someone gets a quarterback injured, they're going to call this guy, still come
Seriously.
back out and play. I mean, he's still got it in him.
I think it's one of those things where both can be incredibly right. Like, obviously, Tom Brady gave that organization more than Baker Mayfield is ever going to be able to
Yes.
in terms of the things that last and sit in the trophy case and that they bring guys back for in celebrations. That's not to say the Bucs can't go on and accomplish a lot of great stuff, but I think there's a different ceiling when we talk about these guys. At the same time, again, I talked about this yesterday. I had a limited window into winning at a level that broaches anywhere near this, going through a season that demands this from you on a week in and week out basis. And there's a bunch of parts of it that suck, that aren't fun, that are incredibly stressful. Like, I felt like I was getting an ulcer most of 2012, and that was for 1 year, and Tom's done that for 2 decades. So it is different, the level of scrutiny these guys invite, and it's a different kind of fun that's going on with Baker. I think someone the other day likened it to online, and I wish I could remember and give them credit. Tom Brady's like having your dad in charge, and Baker Mayfield's like having your older brother in charge. They both technically run the show, but they do it very differently.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Charlotte Wilder with us today. It is time for a new segment, thanks to our friends at Chunky's. We are down in the trenches kind of show, okay? So we are going to name the Offensive Lineman of the Week. The award is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup that eats like a meal. So, guys, fellas, GoJo, who stood out to you on the O-line this week?
Yeah, by the way, I mean, shout out to the folks at Chunky for giving us a chance to celebrate Lard's excellence on a show in a way that is branded and sectioned off from the world. The world needs more of this. As a purveyor of the thick six out in the streets, I applaud anyone who's willing to stand up and acknowledge that the best athletes on the field are the people in the middle that you rarely understand what they're doing. That being said, Dan, a little easier to perceive the guys on the edge, and that's where I want to start here on the offensive line, because when we look at the early portion of the season, a lot of people's reaction to offensive line play is based on penalties called. And we saw a bunch of that to start this year, most notably Ronnie Stanley. Opening night for the NFL Chiefs-Ravens got to be put on blast because of the snap infractions, where he lined up, the flags thrown in that game. He felt like he got singled out. And for a guy that's been coming off a couple of years where he has been robbed of his best play by the remnants of an ankle injury that cut him down as he was getting to being one of the guys mentioned as the best left tackle in the league. And how did he respond after that, after this first week, after an offseason where he was around the team, he felt healthier than ever? Saw Seth Walder over at ESPN tweet that Ronnie Stanley, currently the leader in ESPN's pass block win rate metric, that measures the amount of times an offensive lineman in pass protection is able to hold off his defender for longer than 2.5 seconds. That mark where the quarterback is supposed to have had the ball out by then. And Dad, you've got a chance to see this team. Ronnie on tape is already putting up some of the best performances he's had in quite some while, looking healthier than ever. So wanted to shout that out because that's one of the guys that is the mainstay on an offensive line that we know lost a bunch of guys this offseason, was a focus coming in for Baltimore, and especially in the last couple of games has performed at a really high level.
Well, he hasn't. He has been a guy that's been on that injury list the last couple of years, as you'd mentioned. And, yeah, that tough opening night with the alignment penalties. And this old line just had it going on. I mean, playing Buffalo, they just rough shot, ran over him for over 270 yards. Their running back, Derrick Henry's the leading rusher in the league at 30 years old, when that's supposed to be unheard of. And what Ronnie Stanley is doing, not only at the line of scrimmage, Mike, but down the field. I mean, on screens getting down the field, on run blocks getting to the second level. I mean, Derrick Henry was not touched a lot of this game till the second or third level, and it was guys like Ronnie Stanley who were downfield, getting the downfield blocks, combo blocks at the line, and then down to the second level, and even on screens into the third level, of just showing the athletic ability he had to get out in front of plays. And then the power at the line of scrimmage was impressive by this whole line. But with the last few years Ronnie has been through and been one of the mainstays on this line that has gone through some changes, has been pretty impressive.
Yep, the Ravens, the NFL leader, with 6.3 yards per carry so far through the season, 7 rushing touchdowns to go along with that. So they have been the mainstay for this team. So shout out to Ronnie going out there and getting it done. No, I didn't handpick him just because he went to Notre Dame, but it works out pretty well like that as well. Jesse, we've also got another guy that could have been up for this that really sort of underscores just how important guys at this position can be and why more people need to take notice of the thick fellas up front getting it done.
Yeah, Lane Johnson sorely missed, absolutely. Eagles falling again, dropping to 2-2. Now, we know Lane Johnson has been a monster since being drafted, but these numbers really stand out. Listen to this. Since Lane Johnson's rookie season in 2013, the Eagles are 97-59-1 in the 157 games he's played. That's including playoffs. A win percentage of like 62%. Now, in the 37 games without him, the Eagles are 14-23. That win percentage just under 38%. So good when he on field, bad when he not.
Yeah,
You took the words right out of my
Charlotte,
mouth, Jesse.
I would say, Charlotte, it's one of those rare things, on-off stats a little bit easier to come by in the NBA covering that. But
Of course, yeah.
in football, seeing what we've had with Lane, especially where in this last game, Jalen Hurts under as much duress as he was, it just jumps off the page for a guy who watched his other counterpart in Jason Kelce retire this last year, is sort of the last remnant of the old guard there in Philadelphia and sorely missed by that team.
I know. When I saw how Jalen was getting just like rocked I first of all, I was like, okay, where's Lane Johnson? And then I was also like, wait, Lane Johnson is still playing? Like the fact that he's still out there doing what he's doing, it feels like he's been playing forever because Jason Kelce played with him and because Jason Kelce felt like he played forever, which he had. But I think too, when you see a team like, the Chargers and Justin Herbert just get absolutely destroyed. The O-line, what for casual fans, it really unfortunately often only gets attention when that O-line is not performing well. It's sort of like an editor of an article where like when something goes wrong, all of a sudden people know their names, or the producer of something when there's a disaster in film, it's like, well, it was this person's fault. It's the job that gets the job that is most essential and really doesn't get the praise as much as they get blamed when something doesn't go well. And I admire that position in sports so deeply because of the commitment to, it's truly team play. And I'm thrilled that Chunkies is given the chance to really celebrate this, not just when there's a big man touchdown, because I think we need to laud them more.
Yeah, it's certainly the most the position that has to play together the best, and it's struggling now without Lane. Certainly in Philly, Jalen being sacked 13 times, 4 interceptions to a fumble, 2 fumbles, lost a fumble. Though Saquon Barkley is a third leading rusher, he is running the ball well and catching the ball out of the backfield. You just wonder the miss of Lane Johnson and the absence of A.J. Brown, how much this is hurting this offense.
Yeah, I mean, for Philadelphia, there's a lot of questions that arise out of this overall at a time where Nick Sirianni is under fire again. That's a holdover from last season. He brought in all these new coordinators, but offensively, there's still things that look disjointed about this team. Jalen Hurts turning the ball over at a much more consistent clip over the end of last season into this season, in a way that, Dad, makes it really problematic for an Eagles team that right now also has to contend with the Washington Commanders. I think that's been the biggest development through the early portion of the season for two of the teams, Charlotte, that we talk about most in Philadelphia and the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC East, is that Washington might have done it. They bring over Dan Quinn, they hockey line change so much of that front office, and they hit on a quarterback who really does seem to have the juice.
I cannot believe the way they've been playing. Anytime I mean, is Jaden Daniels had like the best completion rate ever by a quarter. Like the numbers, every time I turn on some sort of television, there's some sort of graphic about what Jaden Daniels is doing that absolutely blows my mind. And he's so fun to watch. And we were talking at the start, before the season started, that bottom half, the bottom, 4 teams, we had the Commanders in there, and I was like, yeah, for sure. They have been, I think my favorite thing every season is there's gonna be a team that we put at the bottom to start that really just surprises everybody. And as of right now, at least, the Commanders are blowing my mind, and It's been super fun, which is not something I'd say about the Washington Commanders anytime soon. And here we are.
And they're going to have to, put some points on the board, because while the defense certainly did play better against Cardinals, giving up only 14 points, they've given up, an amount of points this year, the defense has. So Washington's going to have to go score for score with some teams. So that's even more pressure, Mike, on Jaden Daniels as a rookie. As we saw C.J. Stroud be able to do it last year, can Jaden Daniels keep this going throughout the season?
It is always a concern for a first-year player. I'm with you on that, and we talk so much, I think more now than ever, which is good, about the environment that these young quarterbacks come up in. But, man, Jaden Daniels at every step of the way so far has looked ready for the moment. Coming up next, speaking of embracing the moment, we'll talk about an important uniform change in Major League Baseball and in Manhattan Beach, California. Next on GoJo Golic. All right, let's finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review the show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern right here on the DraftKings Network. You can check that out on Samsung TV Plus, on the Roku channel, Xumo Play, Vizio Watch Free Plus, Google TV, and plenty of other fantastic streaming platforms. But if for whatever reason you got to miss us live or any of our great guests, shout out to our buddy Charlotte Wilder still hanging out with us here. You can catch her on Oddball with Amin El Hassan every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network, or right after we get done on YouTube here as soon as we're done with the show. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third, and let's start off. Thank God Major League Baseball is making this change. The All-Star Game, which for years featured Major League Baseball players wearing their regular jerseys with no more see-through stuff, Major League Baseball now going back to letting the All-Star representatives don their hometown team's jerseys for the game the way it was from the 1930s all the way up till 2019. Dad, I'm not the old man for much, but this is one of those nostalgic bits of the sport that I always did love and I'm glad is coming back.
Yeah, I'm glad it's back as well. I mean, listen, in modern times, you try and do changes, you try and upgrade things, or you think you're upgrading things, but you're not. Sometimes just going back to the old school way. Shout out to the old people out there, like myself, that the old ways sometimes, Charlotte, are the best ways, and just do what was done because it was good enough.
I think there's a difference between change and evolution and gimmicks. And I think that this felt very gimmicky to me. And I am anti-gimmick. I'm anti-robot and I'm anti-gimmick. I don't like artificial intelligence and I don't like people trying too hard to make something good, better, and then making it worse because they were trying to be cute, Jesse.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm all in on this.
And it sounds like they're also going to fix the uniform abominations that came out of that Fanatics partnership this year, too, so we don't have any more see-through pants and tiny letters on jerseys that looked ridiculous in JV the entire time. So MLB came up with some fancy statement to do that, to take some of the edge off it, but they basically heard it from the players all year long that this stuff looks terrible, fits terrible, ripped a bunch early in the season, and was generally an eyesore. So shout out to Major League Baseball for taking feedback. It wasn't quite as immediate as when ESPN removed the lime green score bug on Monday Night Football that looked like a penalty in real time during that game. But you still like it when people understand and, Dad, listen to the constituency. Rarely do the players get listened to in such a way. Here is a triumph for that.
I'm trying to think of what lasted. Trying to think of what lasted the least amount of time. Like New Coke didn't last too long. How about the blue the puck with the blue puck in hockey, but it had the tail on it, and to try and have, because it was a fast sport, to follow the puck, but the puck would look like it was in the fourth row of the stands at times. It was just an abomination of I give them credit for trying, but boy, it was a miserable fail.
I just learned about New Coke the other day. I didn't realize that was a thing that had happened.
New Coke?
And they tried to make Coca-Cola just New Coke and like change the recipe and the branding, and everybody flipped out. And then they were like, "Oops, sorry, no." I literally, my husband just told me about this on Sunday.
They actually had like a testing, like a blind testing, and people loved it. So Coca-Cola came out with it, and everybody hated it, and it lasted a couple months. It was gone.
Wow.
I mean, it was like when we went through it in a brief way, although this was more marketing-based with, like, IHOB, the International House of Burgers, or when places try to do those bits that end up just being elaborate marketing schemes here. But, Dad, speaking of short-lived stuff, I mean, God, you lived through ESPN The Phone. I mean, that was one of the most notable ones.
Okay,
boy,
well, that was innovation and disruption and high-tech, so maybe layoff.
That was
good. ESPN The Phone was good, okay?
Thank you,
It was
Kendall
all those
Roy.
words. It was all those words, Charlotte, and the other one is horrific. It was horrific.
Okay. Fair.
Speaking of horrific, why don't we get to that, Jesse, as branding and My Legs came together in joyous harmony to celebrate the beginning of a month dedicated to costumes.
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about the see-through pants in MLB, but you know what's better than see-through pants is no pants. So, we saw Nicole Auerbach's Pop-Tart costume, right? The great people at the Pop-Tarts Bowl sent one to GoJo, and fortunately for us, GoJo made it a sexy Halloween costume. Charlotte, I know you had some thoughts on this. He did it. He did the no pants. It's what we expected.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that, Mike, you were so brave. Also, though, you were really on trend because at a bunch of the fashion weeks this year, we've seen like a lot of people are wearing tights as pants with like coats over it that actually hit exactly where the Pop-Tarts costume hits. So I just want to say that not only are you brave and not only are you flaunting what you've got. Oh my God. That is absolutely not. Way too much
Thank you
leg
for blurring the feet.
right now. Yeah, thank you. No free feet pick. But also, you are really on trend, and you could come to New York and walk around in that, and people would be like, "Is that Prada?" Mm-hmm. So,
no, Charlotte, don't do it. Don't provoke it.
Someone has to.
Shirley, he's going to be in LA, so he doesn't even have to wear tights with it. He can just go.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I do need to put a tan on these things. That's the one bit of feedback that I will take for my uniform policy is I need to throw a little bit of a tan on these upper thighs.
All I know is you can't bend down. You can't bend down.
Seniors
You can't bend down.
Short-circuiting.
I mean,
it's
I wasn't
a sexy
naked
Halloween costume,
this.
Senior.
I know there's some people that
down.
want to imagine I was, but I wasn't naked underneath that.
Put some pants on.
Yeah. So
Put some pants on.
No, boo, no pants. GoJo, this is what we have to see, though. So you put it on, you tweeted the picture, you're so silly. Are you going to wear it on Halloween like that?
Well, so this is the thing is I would wear it to a Halloween party. I also go trick-or-treating with one of my buddies and his son in a neighborhood, and if I wear it I'm going to have to introduce myself to my neighbors later on in life because I'm going to be on some government watch list. So I will wear pants in that setting, but if I go to like a fun, sexy adult Halloween party, then Slutty Pop-Tart's making an appearance, baby. Come on.
All right, well, you better get yourself
match my
invited
freak?
to the party because we need to see it.
I have not been.
By the way, Dad,
to see parties where you dress up for Halloween.
Dad, they sent 2 costumes. They sent one for you.
Oh, I'll wear one, but I'll have pants on.
Oh, come on! The internet will riot, Senior. Come on!
The internet doesn't want pants. The internet wants no pants.
Dad's nervous because while he wins from the hair up, the legs down. That's my dojo. Now, I got the calves from Dad, but he's a long way from being on the Reformer. Shout out to Studio MDR. Great Pilates if you're trying to get legs like these. I am your poster child right now, boy.
I got one calf deformed because I tore it and didn't get it operated on. I got another knee that's a mess that has to be replaced that looks like a big knobby knee. So, the legs are not my thing. I will not be donning that outfit.
You could wear tights, and then it blurs a lot of those things.
I would wear tights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Finally, a costume that caters to my best features by covering my face and upper half and exposing only my skanky little legs.
Don't talk about yourself.
Let's get away from that image. Shout out to the folks at the Pop-Tarts Ball. You little freaks. I love you so much. And let's get to the third here. Speaking of things that people can eat.
Yeah, so something we can all get behind here. Extremely fair prices for concessions at the Utah Hockey Club. I feel like we've gone back in time here. Look at this. Dasani bottled water, $2. Box of popcorn, $3. Nachos, $3. Hot dogs, $3. Ice cream, $3. It will be available at all home games for them this year. God, you love to see it, guys. Can you imagine you can get like a whole meal? You can sit down and have a whole meal there.
This is reminiscent of the Masters, right? The Masters have the egg salad and pimento cheese sandwich for $1.50, a breakfast sandwich for $3, Masters Club chicken salad and honey wheat for $3. So it's affordable pricing for good, good food.
Makes me feel like hopping on my bike, doing my newspaper route, and heading down to the 5 and 10. Am I right?
Go and get a gallon of milk while you pay a nickel for gas. Have you heard the news? Mike's dressed up as a Pop-Tart, and you can eat that too.
You both stop it.
It's great. I love it. Shout out
If you enjoy reasonably priced foods and very see-through food costumes for Halloween. Download, subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Leave it a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. And check out Oddball with Charlotte and Amin El Hassan. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.